In the shadow of a burning masquerade, where sparks danced and horror unfolded, the 14th century was a time when the world seemed to teeter on the edge of chaos. Just imagine a king, surrounded by a flaming spectacle, narrowly escaping death, and a city in uproar. This ghastly event, known as the Bal des Ardents, or the Dance of the Burning Ones, was not just a moment of terror, but a symbolic exclamation point to a century already marked by one calamity after another. In 1393, King Charles VI of France, known for his bouts of madness, was nearly killed when a masquerade went horribly wrong. The flames that engulfed the dancers were a terrifying reminder of the fragility of life and the unpredictable nature of fate. Paris, the heart of French royalty and culture, was thrown into a state of shock. The citizens, already weary from the king's erratic behavior, were furious. They blamed the court's frivolity for putting the king's life and honor at risk. If Charles had died, the people vowed to rise up and exact a brutal revenge, sparing not a single noble or knight within the city. The royal uncles, recognizing the danger of these sentiments, which echoed the violence of the Maillotins' rebellion just a decade earlier, urged the king to make amends. Charles, along with his uncles and brother, rode in a solemn procession to Notre Dame Cathedral, a public act of penance to appease the angry masses. Behind the king, his uncles and brother marched barefoot, symbolizing their contrition. One of the key figures in this tragedy, Louis d'Orléans, was particularly blamed for his reckless behavior. To atone for his part in the disaster, Louis built a chapel for the Celestins, a religious order, adorning it with exquisite stained glass and rich furnishings. He also endowed it with funds for perpetual prayers, though it was unclear whose soul he sought to absolve, his own or the king's. This terrifying incident was not just a moment of personal and political drama. It reflected a broader cultural shift. The Bal des Ardents could just as easily have been called the Danse Macabre, a term that was gaining popularity at the time. The Danse Macabre, or Dance of Death, was a new kind of processional play that emerged in the 14th century, emphasizing the inevitability of death and the equalizing power of the grave. This macabre theme was not just a theatrical performance, but a reflection of the widespread fear and fascination with death that dominated the era. The concept of the Danse Macabre first appeared in a poem by Jean Lefebvre, the Chancellor of Anjou, in 1376. The poem included the line, "Je fais de macabre la danse," I do the dance macabre. The origin of the term macabre is uncertain, but it may have derived from the older Danse Macabrius, meaning of the Maccabees, or from the Hebrew word for grave diggers, reflecting the role of Jews as undertakers in medieval France. The dance itself likely developed in response to the recurring plague, which served as a constant reminder of the fragility of life. In the Church of the Innocents in Paris, murals depicting the Danse Macabre showed 15 pairs of figures, ranging from the Pope and Emperor to a monk and a peasant, all marching together in a procession led by a cadaverous figure. The accompanying verses were a stark reminder of mortality. The constable knew that death carried off the bravest, even heroes like Charlemagne. The knight, once adored by ladies, knew he would dance no more. The plump abbot was reminded that the fattest rotted first. The astrologer, despite his knowledge, could not escape death. The peasant, who had lived a life of toil and often wished for death, now found that when the hour came, he would rather be digging in the vineyards, even in rain and wind. The message was clear. Death comes to all, regardless of status or wealth. This cult of death reached its peak in the 15th century, but its roots were firmly planted in the 14th. When death was a constant threat, it might have become mundane, but instead it became a source of ghoulish fascination. Art and literature of the time often focused on the physical details of decay and putrefaction. Effigies of the dead, once serene and hopeful, now depicted realistic cadavers. Death masks and molds of bodily parts were used to create lifelike representations, promoting a new recognition of individual traits. The Cemetery of the Innocents in Paris, with its murals of the Danse Macabre, became a popular and desirable burial place. Charnel houses, built into the cloister's arches, were donated by wealthy citizens and nobles who wanted to be close to the relics of the dead. The old dead were continually disinterred to make room for the new, and the skulls and bones piled up under the arches, drawing curious visitors and providing a stark reminder of the leveling power of death. The cemetery became a bustling place, filled with shops, prostitutes, and alchemists, all mingling with the macabre atmosphere. Art in this period reflected the lugubrious mood. The crown of thorns, rarely depicted before, became a symbol of Christ's suffering, and the Virgin Mary was shown with 7 sorrows, from the flight into Egypt to the Piet, where she cradles her dead son. Sculptors like Klaus Schluter created the first known Piet, in France in 1390, adding a new depth of emotion to religious art. At the same time, secular art remained vibrant and playful, with beautiful depictions of picnics and idyllic scenes that seemed to ignore the grim realities of the world. The Black Death, which first struck in 1347, returned for the 4th time in 1388-90. This time, it affected a new adult generation, further reducing Europe's population, which was already down to between 40 and 50% of its pre-1300 levels. The impact was visible in reduced trade, abandoned abbeys and churches, and urban areas left in ruins. Despite the population decline, people may have eaten better, and more money circulated. The merchant class grew wealthier, and their spending fueled advancements in arts, technology, and literature. The 14th century was not without its bright spots. Tapestry workshops in Arras, Brussels, and Paris produced stunning works of art, and mariners' maps became more accurate, allowing sea monsters to be replaced by navigational aids. The flamboyant style in architecture, with its intricate pinnacles and lacy buttresses, expressed a defiance of decline and a belief in the beauty of creation. Despite the pervasive sense of pessimism, there were still moments of creativity and hope. The psychological effects of the times were profound. Writers and poets often focused on the miseria of human life, and the reduced population promoted a sense of pessimism. The letters of Francisco de Tini, a merchant from Prato, reveal a man living in constant fear of war, pestilence, famine, and insurrection. The idea that the world was in decline was widespread, and many believed the time was near for the coming of Antichrist and the end of the world. Churchmen and moralists emphasized the vanity of worldly things, though this did little to diminish the desire for possessions. The sense of a moral decline from a better past was a common theme. Poets like Deschamps and Christine de Pizan lamented the loss of virtue and the corruption of society. Even the University of Paris was not immune, as degrees in theology were sold to those unwilling to undertake the rigorous studies. The yearning for peace and an end to the schism between the papal factions was widespread. A notary from Cahors noted that in 36 years, he had never known a time without war. Peace was seen as the only hope for reform, unity, and resistance against external threats like the Turks, who had reached the Danube. The Duke of Burgundy, who needed peace to restore commerce between Flanders and England, supported the idea. A hermit named Robert appeared at court, claiming that a divine voice had commanded him to tell the king to make peace with England. The King of England, Richard II, also desired an end to the war to consolidate his power and reduce the influence of the barons. However, the sticking point was Calais, which the French were unwilling to cede. In this world of constant turmoil and uncertainty, the Danse Macabre and the cult of death were not just artistic expressions, but a reflection of the deep-seated fears and anxieties of the time. The 14th century was a period of great change, marked by both despair and resilience. Despite the challenges, people continued to create, to believe, and to hope for a better future. The Dance of Death, with its message of equality in the face of mortality, served as a stark reminder that, in the end, all must face the same fate.